Hi, everybody. This is Mrs. Keep, and this is going to be the first part of a multi part um, lesson on Beowulf. Now, we're going to read excerpts. So, here's what you need you need the downloadable Word document that was attached in Schoology. We are using the version translated by Burton Raffle, and we're using the excerpts that are included in the Pearson textbook. So, if you download the PDF that I included at the beginning of week 5, uh, then you can read along with us. And what I'm going to do, what I want you to do, is have the text in front of you. And then, just like a real classroom, because I'm in my real classroom, we're going to stop and we're going to talk about what's going on in this part of the poem. Okay? And look, I made my nails monster orange for you. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with From Beowulf, Part 1, translated by Burton Raffle. The Monster Grendel. A powerful monster, living down in the darkness, growled in pain, impatient, as day after day the music rang loud in that hall. Okay, so we already, in the first couple of lines, have established we are looking at the monster's perspective. And he is in agony, this poor monster, because somebody up in the hall, in the mead hall, right, which is the center of the feudal village, yeah, someone's singing and it's giving him a headache. And let's find out what they're singing about. We're going to pick up on the end of line 4. The harp's rejoicing, call and the poet's clear song sung of the ancient beginnings of us all, recalling the Almighty making the earth, shaping these beautiful plains marked off by oceans, and then proudly setting the sun and moon to glow over the land and light it. The corners of the earth were made lovely with trees, and leaves made quick with life, with each of the nations who now move on its face. And then, as now, warriors sang of their pleasure. Okay, so what's making Grendel angry and upset and in pain? The fact that up in the mead hall they're singing songs about God and about creation and how wonderful it all is. Well, okay, why does that bother Grendel? Why does Grendel even care other than they're loud? Like, who cares? Okay, so as we read, we're going to find out, but it's setting us up for that question. Like, why does he even care? Also, are you noticing that what we're seeing here is the combination of Christianity and polytheism, right? So the idea that here's the monster, that's a very polytheistic idea. And then you have like the hymns to God and the creation myth. And that's a very Christian idea, right? So we're seeing a clash already, Maybe you want to put that in your notes? Yes? Mm. You can hit pause and go put it in your notes. Okay, so picking up with line 15. So, Hrothgar's men. Now, Hrothgar is the king. He's the lord of this area, of this feudal area, and his hall, Herat, is where they're sitting in. So Hrothgar's men lived happy in his hall till the monster stirred. That demon, that fiend, Grendel, who haunted the moors, the wild marshes, and made his home in a hell. Not hell, but earth. So our author here is clarifying for us. Okay, his home is out in these horrible wild places. It's like hell, but he doesn't actually live in hell. Now we're going to get some backstory on Grendel, starting with line 19 at the end. He was spawned in that slime, conceived by a pair of those monsters born of Cain, murderous creatures, banished by God, punished forever for the crime of Abel's death. The Almighty drove those demons out, and their exile was bitter. Shut away from men, they split into 1,000 forms of evil, spirits and fiends, goblins, monsters, giants, a brood forever opposing the Lord's will, and again defeated. Okay, well, now we know where Grendel came from. He is a descendant of Cain. Now, remember, we're going to get that mixture of Christianity in here. If you remember your Old Testament, right, you have Adam and Eve. They get kicked out of the Garden of Eden for eating the apple and disobeying God. And then they have two sons, Cain and Abel. Yeah? And then Cain kills Abel. Right? And for that, Cain is punished not with death, but, like his parents, with exile. So within this poem, the explanation for all the monsters and horrific creatures and demons and everything being in the world is that they are descendants of Cain. And therefore, they hate God because they have been exiled from society. And so they hate God forever, which is why Grendel can't stand to listen to people in Herat in the hall singing God's praises and singing about how wonderful creation is, right? He can't stand that. Think of it this way. Have you ever been in a group of people, right? And you didn't like somebody for whatever reason. And every time they were mentioned, or every time they did something, even if it wasn't directed at you, even if it had nothing to do with you, it just annoyed you. Like, they're breathing over there in that corner and it's annoying me, right? Okay, that is Grendel and God times a billion. All right, so now we know where we stand. Okay, so we're going to keep going. We're going to jump down to where it says 2 in your text, which is also line 30. Ready? Okay. Then, when darkness had dropped, Grendel went up to Herat. So Grendel is coming out of his cave and going up to the mead hall, which is called Herat, wondering what the warriors would do in that hall when their drinking was done. So they've been drinking and carrying on. What are they doing at night? Okay, well, what did the warriors do at night? They sleep in the hall, because the hall is the center of their community, right? Their lord is there, the food and drink is there, it's a safe place, it's a warm place, because they'll have a fire going. So instead of sleeping out in some tent somewhere, right, or out, under the stars, because these are traveling, well, usually traveling, they're fighting men, right? These aren't like farmers. So they sleep in the hall. Think of all those fantasy movies you've ever seen, yeah? So here comes Grendel at night. All these men are asleep in this big hall, and here he comes. Line 34. He found them sprawled in sleep, suspecting nothing, their dreams undisturbed. The monster's thoughts were as quick as his greed or his claws. He slipped through the door, and there, in the silence, snatched up 30 men, smashing them unknowing in their beds, and ran out with their bodies, the blood dripping behind him, back to his lair, delighted with his night's slaughter. This is a horror movie. Absolutely a horrific scene. And the fact that he's dragging their bodies back. He's got 30 men's bodies. He must be huge to be able to drag 30 men's bodies. Now imagine you woke up in the morning and there's blood everywhere and 30 people are missing, and there's a trail of blood and gore and guts down into caves. That's what the reality that these guys wake up to. Ugh. Okay. And he's delighted by it. He loves it. Grendel's into bleh. Okay. At daybreak, so this is line 41. At daybreak, with the sun's first light, they saw how well he had worked. That well is irony. And in that gray light broke their long feast with tears and laments for the dead. It's a nice play on words there, right? Usually you break your fast with breakfast. Now they broke their feast with crying. Hrothgar, their lord, sat joyless in Herat, a mighty prince mourning the fate of his lost friends and companions, knowing by its tracks that some demon had torn his followers apart. This is doing an interesting thing here in that it keeps taking us into the heads of the various characters, right? We've been in Grendel's head, now we're in Hrothgar's head. Imagine being a king and you're supposed to protect all your people, right? They're in your house. You're protecting them. And you wake up in the morning and 30 of them are gone and there's blood everywhere and people are dead. Yeah, you'd feel really responsible but not really be able to do anything about it, right? He wept, fearing the beginning might not be the end. Ooh, and it's not either. I'm sorry, Hrothgar, it's not. And that night, Grendel came again. So set on murder that no crime would ever be enough. No savage assault quench his lust for evil. Then each warrior tried to escape him, searched for rest in different beds, as far as from Herat as they could. Seeing how Grendel hunted when they slept, distance was safety. The only survivors were those who fled him. Hate had triumphed. Okay, so we got a lot right there, right? So not only does Grendel show up the next night and attack them again, he shows up night after night after night. And suddenly Herat, the mead hall, goes from a place of community safety to the most dangerous place to be. And all these warriors who were together and feasting and safe together and a community are broken up because it's not safe to stay. So they keep going farther and farther and farther away because that's the only way you live. So now Herat is destroyed as a place. The community is fractured and hate has triumphed. And this goes on for a while. If you look at line 59. So Grendel ruled, fought with the righteous, won against many, and won. So Herat stood empty and stayed deserted for years. 12 winters of grief for Hrothgar, king of the Danes. Sorrow heaped at his door by hell-forged hands. Isn't that a great phrase? His misery leaped the seas, was told and sung in all men's ears. Okay, so it's been 12 years that this community's been destroyed and that Grendel keeps coming. And maybe he doesn't show up every night, but it doesn't really matter because, everybody's everywhere and nobody's together anymore. But the king is still there. And he's mourning for his lost people. He's mourning for his community, right? All of this. Okay, now when they say that the king's misery leapt the seas or leaped the seas, they don't mean that he jumped across water. They mean that his story spread because, of course, we're in a pre-writing society. Yeah? I mean, some people were writing, but most people weren't. How do you find out what's going on? People talk. People tell stories. And all these warriors who fled from Herat are going to spread the story about why they left. So the idea of Grendel and the story of Grendel and the horrors that he's done are spreading. Okay, we're going to pick up on line 64 here. His misery leapt the seas, was told and sung in all men's ears, how Grendel's hatred began, how the monster relished his savage war on the Danes, keeping the blood feud alive, seeking no peace offering, no truce, accepting no settlement, no price in gold or land, and paying the living for one crime only with another. No one waited for reparation from his plundering claws. That shadow of death hunted in the darkness, stalked Hrothgar's warriors, old and young, lying in wait, hidden in mist, invisibly following them from the edge of the marsh, always there, unseen. Okay, there's two things we need to unpack there. First, he is always there. They are always scared of him. They always know he's watching. That's terrifying. And they're really building up the villainy and how dangerous and frightening he is. The second thing is that whole thing about no truce, no settlement, no price, the blood feud. Okay, so this is an era, right, before courts. And if you, I mean, you've heard like eye for an eye, life for a life, right? Okay, so back in the day, if you killed somebody, right, their family could kill you in revenge. But the problem with that is that, like, family A kills someone, even by accident, from family B. Family B then kills someone from family A. Family A now kills someone from, and just murder goes on forever, right? So, to end that and to make a more equitable way, like a peaceful way to deal with the fact that you'd cause someone's death, maybe in war, maybe by accident, maybe on purpose, right? Maybe you were mad and you guys were fighting and they got killed, and now what do? Okay, so here's what they did. You owed the family a blood price. So you would, talk to the family and you would come to an agreement and you would pay them the blood price for the person you killed. And this happened on large scale as well. So let's say two communities went to war and, this one won. Well, they would then pay the blood price to the people who lost for their soldiers who died. Well, they weren't really soldiers, but you know what I mean. They're men who died. But Grendel doesn't play by those rules, right? He's not playing by the community's standards. He's just slaughtering and coming in and killing more and more and more. And there's no way to end this without more blood. Okay? So, we're going to pick up with line 79 here. So mankind's enemy continued his crimes, killing as often as he could, coming alone, bloodthirsty, and horrible. Though he lived in Herat, when the night hid him, he never dared touch King Hrothgar's glorious throne, protected by God, God, whose love Grendel could not know. Okay, now this is an interesting thing, right? You would think, if you were Grendel, you would just attack the king and be done with it, right? But he can't. Why? Because the king is protected and appointed by God. And you remember this, right? From history, like the divine right of kings. Yeah? And again, we're going to see in a minute, like the mixture of the pagan and the Christian here, but here we're still very much on the Christian side. So if God is protecting the king and Grendel hates God and fears God, Grendel can't attack the king, but he can attack everything else around him. Make sense? Okay, so picking up on the end of line 85. But Hrothgar's heart was bent. It's the king's heart broken. The best and most noble of his council debated remedies, sat in secret sessions, talking of terror and wondering what the bravest warriors could do. So he's gotten all his guys together and they're trying to come up with a solution. But what's going to work against a giant beast that can drag away 30 men, right? Where's Hercules when you need him? All right. And now, on line 90, we're going to see that they are making some decisions that our writer does not approve of. And sometimes they sacrificed to the old stone gods, made heathen vows, hoping for hell's support, the devil's guidance in driving their affliction away. That was their way, and heathens' only hope. Hell always in their hearts, knowing neither God nor his passing as he walks through our world, the Lord of heaven and earth, their ears could not hear his praise, nor know his glory. Let them beware those who are thrust into danger, clutched at by trouble, yet can carry no solace in their hearts, cannot hope to be better. Hail to those who will rise to God, drop off their dead bodies and seek our Father's peace. Okay, why is there suddenly a prayer and religious advice in the middle of your epic poem? Well, because remember about the blend of paganism and Christianity, right? The characters are engaging in pagan practices. They're sacrificing to the old gods because they're so desperate for anybody to come help. Yeah? However, our Christian Writer feels the need to say, this is a bad thing, don't do it. No matter how desperate you are, don't don't deal with those pagan gods. You stick with our God. Make sense? Okay. And you've probably had that. Like, you ever watch something on TV or watch something in a movie with a particularly religious member of your family, and they take the opportunity to make whatever you're watching into a religious lesson? That's what our author's doing here. Okay, so let's look at section 3, picking up with line 104. So, the living sorrow of Healfdene's son. Healfdene's son is Hrothgar the king. This is a case where genealogy and where you come from and who your parents are is pretty important. So they're referring back to his father, but they're talking about the king. So the living sorrow of Healfdene's son simmered, bitter and fresh, and no wisdom or strength could break it. That agony hung on king and people alike, harsh and unending, violent and cruel and evil. And then here comes our hero. You ready? In his far-off home, Beowulf, Hygelac's follower, so he belongs to another community entirely. His lord is Hygelac. And the strongest of the Geats, greater and stronger than anyone anywhere in this world. Okay. Way to be subtle there, author. Heard how Grendel filled knights with horror, and quickly commanded a boat fitted out, proclaimed he'd go to that famous king, would sail across the sea to Hrothgar now when help was needed. None of the wise ones regretted his going, much as he was loved by the Geats. The omens were good, and they urged the adventure on. So Beowulf chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest and best of the Geats, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. He knew the sea, and would point the prow straight to the distant Danish shore. Okay, so we have the entry of our hero after they've set up how awful the situation is and how long it's been going on and how terrible the monster is, and basically how undefeatable he is. Here shows up our boy Beowulf with the strongest, best, bravest, everything. Yeah? And so we're going to follow him throughout the story. But you notice we're seeing some of those Anglo-Saxon traits, right, that you studied back in week 2. We're seeing the sailing. We're seeing the fact that he needs like permission from his lord to go, and that the community's supporting each other, right? We're seeing the paganism to Christianity. We're seeing the repetition of alliteration. We're seeing the structure of the poem, even though we're reading it in translation. You can still kind of see some of those Old English traits, right? Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to go back into Schoology, and you've got assignments that go with what we just read, and you're going to start putting together your notes in a Google Sheet, and you're going to put your notes across in each section that go with the this part of the story, and we'll continue those notes as we go. All right? Thank you very much, guys. See you next time.